Rock stars are supposed to be rebels, geniuses, and living legends. But sometimes they make decisions so spectacularly dumb that you have to wonder how they manage to tie their own shoes. From destroying careers over petty disputes to literally snorting bugs off the ground, these musicians proved that talent and intelligence don't always go hand in hand. Here are 15 shocking stories about rock stars who made jaw-droppingly stupid decisions. Jerry Lee Lewis brings his child bride to England. Jerry Lee Lewis was riding high in 1958 as one of rock and roll's earliest superstars, with hits like Great Balls of Fire making him a serious rival to Elvis Presley himself. His British tour was supposed to cement his status as an international star. But Lewis made one catastrophically stupid decision that destroyed everything. He brought along his new wife, Myra Gale Brown, who happened to be his 13-year-old first cousin once removed. When a journalist at London's Heathrow Airport asked Myra who she was, she casually revealed she was Lewis's wife. Lewis initially claimed she was 15, but reporters quickly discovered the truth and that he was still technically married to his previous wife when the ceremony took place. The British press immediately branded him a cradle robber and baby snatcher, with concerts cancelled within days. His fee for personal appearances plummeted from $10,000 a night to just $250. Radio stations stopped playing his music. Former friends abandoned him, and it would take Lewis a full decade to rebuild his career through country music. What makes this particularly stupid is that Lewis's managers had explicitly warned him not to bring Myra to England, knowing the British press would destroy him. He ignored them completely, apparently believing that no one would care about his relationship with a child. Keith Moon accidentally kills his own driver. Keith Moon earned his nickname Moon the Loon through countless acts of hotel destruction and wild pranks. But one incident in 1970 crossed the line from stupid to tragic. On January 4th, Moon attended the opening of the Red Lion pub in Hatfield, a small working-class town where locals didn't appreciate the flamboyant wealth Moon flaunted in his Bentley. When pub patrons began attacking his car, Moon made the incredibly stupid decision to get behind the wheel despite being drunk and unlicensed. What he didn't know was that his driver and bodyguard, Neil Boland, had gotten caught underneath the vehicle trying to stop the attackers. Moon drove off, dragging Boland down the road to his death. Moon was charged with causing Boland's death, drunk driving, and driving without a license or insurance. The coroner eventually ruled it an accidental death, and Moon only pled guilty to the drunk driving charge. The incident haunted Moon for the rest of his short life, contributing to the substance abuse problems that would kill him just 8 years later at age 32. What makes this so stupid is that Moon had a professional driver specifically so he wouldn't have to make these kinds of decisions. His choice to take the wheel while intoxicated, despite having someone whose literal job was to drive him, turned a scary situation into a deadly one. The Goo Goo Dolls sign away their entire future. When the Goo Goo Dolls were desperate young musicians in the late 1980s, they made one of the stupidest business decisions in rock history by signing with Metal Blade Records without reading the contract carefully. The label reportedly exploited their naivete and got them to sign away most of their royalty rights in what would become an absolutely disastrous deal. The band toiled away for years, with all 3 members working part-time jobs just to survive. Then in 1995, their album A Boy Named Goo became a massive hit, led by the single Name, which sold millions of copies. The band should have finally been wealthy, but instead each member received just $6,000 a year from their label. Not $60,000, not $600,000, but $6 measly thousand annually, while their album generated millions. They later sued the label, claiming they'd been exploited and manipulated into signing an unfair contract that stripped away their earnings. The stupidity here wasn't just signing a bad deal, something many young bands do, but signing it without any legal representation or even a careful reading of the terms. They were so desperate for a record deal that they essentially gave away their entire careers for almost nothing. While they eventually escaped the contract and found success, those crucial early years when Name was everywhere on the radio earned them less than minimum wage. David Bowie praises Hitler. David Bowie was in the grip of severe cocaine addiction during 1976 while recording Station to Station, staying awake for days on end and suffering tremendously for his art. But his addiction led to one of the stupidest public statements any rock star has ever made. In an interview with Playboy magazine, Bowie declared, "I believe very strongly in fascism. Adolf Hitler was one of the first rock stars." Around the same time, he was photographed at London's Victoria Station, appearing to give what looked like a Nazi salute. The statement and photo immediately sparked outrage, threatening to destroy the career of one of rock's most innovative artists. Bowie would later claim he didn't remember saying it, blaming his comments on his drug-addled state and lack of sleep. He spent years trying to walk back the remarks, insisting he'd been misunderstood and that his mental state at the time made him say things he didn't believe. The stupidity wasn't just in holding these views, if indeed he did, but in expressing them to a major publication at the height of his career. Cocaine may have fueled his creative genius on Station to Station, but it also nearly destroyed everything he'd built by making him spout off fascist sympathies to the press. Even acknowledging his admitted drug use at the time, choosing to do an interview while in that state was profoundly stupid. Mick Fleetwood goes bankrupt, despite massive success. Mick Fleetwood founded Fleetwood Mac in 1967, and by 1977, the band's album Rumours had become one of the best-selling records of all time. By 1984, it ranked as the 7th best-selling album ever. So how did Fleetwood, the founder and manager, end up filing for bankruptcy in 1984? Through spectacularly stupid financial management. As the drummer rather than a songwriter, Fleetwood earned less than his bandmates from royalties, but he still made millions. His problem was that he loved great drums, cars, beautiful women, and magnificent pieces of real estate, as his lawyer delicately put it. Fleetwood spent money faster than it came in, buying property and vehicles without any restraint or financial planning. But the stupidity went deeper than just lavish spending. Fleetwood served as the band's manager for 5 years, meaning he was responsible for managing not just his own finances, but the band's money as well. The fact that someone with such poor financial judgment was handling millions of dollars for one of the world's biggest bands is mind-boggling. When Fleetwood filed for bankruptcy, people across the music industry asked how someone who'd been in one of the most financially successful rock bands ever could possibly be broke. The answer was simple but stupid. He spent every penny he made and then some, apparently never considering that his income might not last forever. Van Halen's catastrophic singer swap. Van Halen faced a crossroads in the mid-1990s after their massive success with both David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar as frontmen. The best move forward would have been either reuniting with Roth or continuing with Hagar to make another hit album. Instead, they made one of rock's stupidest lineup decisions by firing Hagar, teasing a Roth reunion at the MTV Video Music Awards, and then hiring former Extreme singer Gary Cherone to front the band. The timing couldn't have been worse, as grunge had taken over and MTV wasn't spinning Van Halen videos like they used to. The resulting album, Van Halen 3, was poorly received by both fans and critics, and Cherone's tenure lasted just one underwhelming album and tour. Hagar himself later told Rolling Stone, "That was the biggest mistake the band has ever made." What makes this so stupid is that they had 2 proven winning options sitting right in front of them and chose a third option that satisfied nobody. They could have swallowed their pride and worked with Hagar, who'd given them multiple #1 albums. They could have actually reunited with Roth instead of just teasing it. Instead, they brought in a singer from a completely different style of rock at exactly the wrong moment in music history. The decision confused fans, damaged the band's momentum, and proved that sometimes the safest choice really is the smartest one. Ozzy Osbourne's disgusting contest with Motley Crue. Ozzy Osbourne has done many outrageous things throughout his career, but in 1984, while touring with Motley Crue, He took stupidity to a whole new level. During a pool party at what was reportedly the Four Seasons Hotel in Dallas, the musicians were engaged in trying to out-rock star each other in increasingly disgusting ways. Ozzy, drunk out of his mind, spotted a trail of ants crawling toward a kid's popsicle that had been left on the ground. In a move that would become rock legend, Ozzy got down on all fours and snorted the line of ants through his nose as if they were cocaine. When Motley Crue bassist Nikki Sixx tried to one-up him by urinating on the ground and preparing to lick it up, Ozzy beat him to it and licked up Sixx's urine first. The band members immediately conceded defeat, acknowledging that Ozzy had won the gross-out contest. But the stupidity didn't end there. After being kicked out of the pool area, Ozzy got into an elevator full of people and, sensing another opportunity for depravity, continued his disgusting behavior. Drummer Tommy Lee insists the story is absolutely true, though former guitarist Jake E. Lee claims it was a spider, not ants. Regardless of the exact insect involved, Ozzy admits he did it, saying, "I was drunk and I did it." The sheer stupidity of snorting insects and drinking urine just to prove you're the wildest person at a party defies all logic and reason. Axl Rose jumps into the crowd and causes a riot. Guns N' Roses was performing Rocket Queen at the Riverport Amphitheater in Missouri on July 2, 1991, when Axl Rose spotted a fan taking unauthorized video of the show. After yelling at security to remove the fan and getting no immediate response, Rose made the profoundly stupid decision to take matters into his own hands. He announced to the crowd, "I'll take it, goddammit," and then dove headfirst into the audience to confront the fan himself. The person with the camera turned out to be the leader of a motorcycle gang called the Saddle Tramps, and Rose ended up punching him and others before being pulled back onto stage by crew members. Furious, Rose told the crowd, "Well, thanks to the lame-ass security, I'm going home," and smashed his microphone before storming off stage. The band followed him, and once fans realized Guns N' Roses wasn't coming back, a massive riot erupted. Over 60 people were injured, with about $200,000 in damage to equipment and the venue. 400 police officers were needed to stop the riot. Rose was charged with inciting the riot, though a judge later ruled he wasn't directly responsible. What makes this so staggeringly stupid is that Rose had security personnel, crew members, and multiple other options to handle one fan with a camera. Instead, he chose the most explosive option possible, abandoned a paying audience mid-concert, and sparked 3 hours of violence. The fan he attacked, Bill Stevenson, later sued Rose and settled for $160,000. Paul McCartney's bafflingly dumb drug smuggling. In January 1980, Paul McCartney was scheduled to play a huge tour of Japan with his band Wings. He was an internationally famous Beatle and multimillionaire who could have anything he wanted delivered discreetly to him anywhere in the world. So, what did McCartney do? He stuffed 8 ounces of cannabis into his luggage before boarding a flight to Japan, a country known for its extremely strict drug laws. The Japanese customs officials found it immediately upon inspection, which isn't surprising since McCartney apparently made no effort to hide it well. He faced up to 7 years in a Japanese prison for his spectacularly stupid decision. McCartney later admitted, "I don't know why I did it. I was stupid." The tour was immediately canceled, costing the band and promoters massive amounts of money. What makes this particularly idiotic is that McCartney had absolutely no reason to personally transport drugs across international borders. He had the resources to have anything he wanted waiting for him at his destination. He knew Japan's customs would be thorough. He knew the legal consequences could be severe. Yet he casually packed marijuana in his bag as if he were flying domestically in California. Some cynics claimed he was framed by John Lennon and Yoko Ono, but that theory has never been substantiated. The most likely explanation is the simplest one. One of the world's most famous musicians made an incredibly dumb decision that nearly landed him in prison. Ted Nugent trusts the wrong people with his fortune. Ted Nugent was a master self-promoter in the 1970s who could sell out shows and move 1 million records at a time. He bragged about his kick-ass accountant who got a sensual thrill doing his books, claiming to be very hands-on with his money management. But a 1979 Rolling Stone article revealed the first sign of Nugent's stupid financial decisions, when the reporter watched him quickly sign $87,000 worth of bonus checks for employees in just a few minutes while running late for a gig. Nugent said he paid his business associates handsomely, including everyone from musicians and roadies to farmers on his mink ranch. Wait, did we mention the mink ranch? Despite making millions from his music career, Nugent's managers made disastrous decisions with his money, investing in failing businesses that included an actual mink farm. While Nugent isn't completely stupid for delegating financial decisions to professionals, his stupidity lies in not properly vetting those professionals or monitoring what they were doing with his money. He trusted people who then squandered his fortune on bizarre investments like mink farming, which is about as far from rock and roll as you can get. The speed at which he signed those massive bonus checks without carefully reviewing them suggests Nugent paid little attention to where his money was actually going. By the time he realized his managers had made terrible decisions, significant damage had been done to his finances. Billy Joel's family betrayal. Billy Joel discovered in the late 1980s that his ex-brother-in-law and former manager, Frank Weber, had been systematically stealing from him for years. Joel sued Weber for $30 million in compensatory damages and $60 million in punitive damages, alleging that Weber had given out $2.5 million in loans without Joel's knowledge or approval, double-billed him for music videos, created phony financial statements, and even mortgaged Joel's copyrights for $15 million without disclosing it. The stupidity here is multi-layered. First, Joel made the stupid decision to hire a family member to manage his vast fortune, mixing business with personal relationships in a way that's rarely advisable. Second, and more importantly, Joel apparently didn't scrutinize his financial statements carefully enough to notice millions of dollars going missing. For someone as successful as Billy Joel, with dozens of hit songs and massive concert revenues, not having proper financial oversight is almost incomprehensibly stupid. Joel eventually recovered some of his losses through lawsuits and by touring extensively, but the experience cost him years of stress and millions of dollars. The betrayal was made worse by the family connection, as Weber had married Joel's sister. Joel had to learn the hard way that trusting someone just because they're family, especially with millions of dollars at stake, is one of the stupidest decisions anyone can make. Badfinger signs with a notorious fraudster. Badfinger was the first band signed to the Beatles' UK label Apple Records, which should have set them up for a successful career. Lacking U.S. representation, they made the catastrophically stupid decision to sign a management contract with Stan Polly, a businessman with a notoriously shady reputation. Attracted by his ability to secure six-figure deals and his previous experience managing music acts, the band rushed to bring him aboard in 1970 without proper vetting. Polly immediately began taking advantage of them by drawing up a contract that required all advances to be paid directly into his bank account. This gave him complete control of the band's finances, and Badfinger saw almost none of the money they earned from record sales and live concerts. The contract essentially crippled the band financially, despite their musical success. The situation became so desperate and hopeless that frontman Pete Ham tragically named Polly directly in his suicide note before taking his own life. Bassist Tom Evans would later also die by suicide. The stupidity here was signing with a manager without properly investigating his background or having lawyers thoroughly review the contract. Polly had a reputation in the industry, and basic due diligence would have revealed his predatory business practices. Instead, the band was so eager for American representation that they rushed into an agreement that destroyed them financially and contributed to the deaths of two talented musicians. Forces their album into everyone's iTunes. In 2014, U2 made a decision they thought was bold and innovative, but turned out to be one of the stupidest moves in rock history. They decided to give away their new album, Songs of Innocence, for free on iTunes, which sounds generous until you realize they didn't just make it available for free. They automatically uploaded it into 500 million people's iTunes accounts without asking permission first. Users around the world suddenly found an album they'd never requested taking up space in their music libraries. The backlash was immediate and fierce, with people feeling violated that their personal devices had been invaded without consent. The criticism was so intense that Bono was forced to publicly apologize for what they'd intended as a gift to fans. What makes this so stupid is that U2 and Apple apparently never considered how people would react to having content forced onto their personal devices. If they'd simply made the album available for free download, people who wanted it could get it, and others could ignore it. Instead, they made the decision for everyone, treating people's iTunes libraries like billboards they could plaster with unwanted content. The band's attempt to be generous and reach a massive audience backfired spectacularly, making them look out of touch and disrespectful of their fans' autonomy. It's a perfect example of how good intentions combined with stupid execution can turn a gift into an insult. Dee Ramone becomes a rapper. Dee Ramone was a founding member and bassist for the Ramones, one of punk rock's most influential and respected bands. His talent for punk music was undeniable, with his songwriting helping define the genre. Then, in the early 1990s, he made one of rock's most baffling career decisions by deciding to become a rapper under the name Dee King. He started wearing full hip-hop regalia to Ramones shows, which confused and alienated fans who'd come to see punk rock. Then he released an actual rap album that was universally panned as one of the worst attempts at genre crossing in music history. The album was so bad that it became a cautionary tale about musicians trying to dramatically change styles without understanding the new genre. The stupidity here is multifaceted. First, Dee had no apparent background, skill, or credibility in hip-hop, which has its own culture and standards that can't be faked. Second, he chose to pursue this at the height of the Ramones' influence, potentially damaging the band's reputation. Third, he seemed to believe that simply adopting the visual style of hip-hop would somehow make him a legitimate rapper. The result was an embarrassing failure that fans and critics still mock decades later. Dee eventually returned to punk rock, but his rap experiment remains one of the most misguided and stupid career detours in rock history. Green Day's bloated triple album. Green Day had massive success with American Idiot in 2004, a politically charged punk rock opera that revitalized their career and introduced them to a new generation. When it came time for a follow-up, they made the incredibly stupid decision to release not one, not two, but 3 separate albums in 2010 as part of a trilogy project. The albums Uno, Dos, and Tres were released just months apart, flooding the market with 45 songs that even their most devoted fans struggled to digest. The quality control was virtually non-existent, with songs that went nowhere like A Little Boy Named Train and failed experiments like Nightlife that had no business existing. While some fans argue that a decent single album could have been assembled from the best songs across all 3, even that theoretical compilation would have been far from the heights of American Idiot, or even their earlier work. The problem wasn't just the quantity of mediocre material, but the fact that Green Day seemed unable to recognize that more isn't always better. The trilogy was supposed to be ambitious, but it came across as self-indulgent and unfocused. Even documentary footage from the time shows fans pleading with the band to play their old songs instead of the new material. The stupidity was in thinking that tripling down on output would somehow equal tripling the success, when in reality it just diluted their brand and exhausted their audience. Guns N' Roses, no show causes another riot. You'd think after the Riverport riot in 1991, Axl Rose would have learned his lesson about causing chaos at concerts. But in November 2002, Guns N' Roses were scheduled to play Vancouver, Canada, to mark what should have been a triumphant resurrection of the band. The show was set to start at 9:30 p.m., but by 8 o'clock that evening, Rose was reportedly still in the air after his flight from Los Angeles had been delayed. The crowd waited and waited, with no explanation or updates provided. Eventually, the show was canceled, and the announcement that Guns N' Roses wasn't coming sparked another riot. Fans destroyed property, fought with police, and caused massive damage downtown. The Vancouver Police Department was later sued by multiple people who were injured, including a 41-year-old fan who lost 6 teeth. The stupidity here is almost impressive in its layers. First, Rose apparently didn't build in any buffer time for potential travel delays when scheduling an important show. Second, there was no backup plan or even basic communication with the waiting audience. Third, this was supposed to be the band's big comeback after years of absence, making the no-show even more damaging to their reputation. The whole incident could have been avoided with better planning, earlier travel, or simply communicating with fans about the delay, rather than leaving thousands of people waiting with no information until the show was abruptly canceled.